Okay, we got Molly.
That is
Molly
correct.
Elmore is an expert in digital assets, CBDCs, blockchain. But guys, before we get started, down below, there's a link. It's called rumble.com. Head over to our other channel, subscribe, because we don't know what's going to go on. We're really on uncharted waters with YouTube. And hopefully the white hats do take over and we're able to build something that's very dynamic. Don't forget, okay, we got incredible merchandise. You got to decorate yourself. You want people to ask you, what is GESARA and NESARA? What is XRP? What is XLM? What's a CBDC? And that's when you send them to QFS1776.com. It's the holy grail. It is the holy Bible of what's to come. It's not like you have a choice to stay in the fiat system. They're going to burn it down to the ground. Okay, there's nothing to go back to. And when this happens, if you go to QFS1776.com, you'll be glad you did, because you're going to get the education of your life that doesn't exist at your local community college. Okay, you might have 3 months, 4 months worth of material in there, but if you watch the videos top to bottom, I don't care who you are. You could be 14-year-old kid, or you could be a 74-year-old grandmother. You're going to get this because we chose the most elementary videos on blockchain, XRP, the quantum financial system, GESARA and NESARA. And if you watch them from top to bottom, we put them in a chronological order, an elementary order that makes perfect sense, that the average person can understand. It's not difficult lingo. Obviously, once you join our Telegram group, which is down below as well, which you want to, the lingo gets a little bit difficult, but then you'll be able to graduate and understand what's going on. This is not easy, but we're going through this transition. Molly, welcome to my show. My wife says, hey, you got to interview Molly. I said, okay, let's do it. We just had some internet issues. Hopefully the internet's going to cooperate going forward. And we'll probably try to knock this out in the next 40, 45 minutes. Tell us the story of how you got involved with digital assets. What do you know about CBDCs? I would love to get into not a debate, but maybe a conversation about that, because I have a whole different perspective, and that's why I think the market's being manipulated. Welcome to the show, Molly.
Thank you very much, Mel. Nice to meet you, and thanks for having me. So my journey with digital assets and CBDCs actually started with a book I read in 2018 called The Creature from Jekyll Island by a guy named G. Edward Griffin. And at the time, I had come from the corporate world, had sort of believed everything I learned in school. And that book completely shocked me in many, many levels, to the point where I was like, I don't even know if I can believe this. So I read it. I actually listened to the audiobook. It's like a 24-hour audiobook experience. And I kind of went about my business, went back to being a business coach and helping entrepreneurs. And then COVID hit. And a lot of the things that I learned in that book were all of a sudden confirmed by other independent sources. So my cognitive dissonance was being tested, because the stuff that I kind of knew but didn't know what to do with all of a sudden turned out to be maybe true after all. And that led me to really this rabbit hole of what is money, who creates money. Is this really the most powerful responsibility or privilege in the world, to be the issuer of the money supply? And how has that power been abused over centuries? And what happens when people try to rebel against the current money supply system? And that's sort of where we got into presidential assassinations and lots of things over time. Eventually, I kind of stumbled upon crypto, because I was like, well, people think this is sort of a new form of money. What's the story here? And found the Bitcoin story with Satoshi Nakamoto. Now, if there's one thing that the Creature from Jekyll Island taught me that has probably impacted me more than any other lesson from that book, just one thing, which is this group of people, he calls them the cartel or the cabal, whatever you want, label you want to give them, they play both sides. And that's sort of their genius move. And so every time we kind of see people split into two groups, left, right, red, blue, there are actors who are actively playing both sides. And so I kind of came into the Bitcoin question of, well, is that one of their sides? I don't know. And I still don't have all the answers to it, but I do like to look at any conflict that is presented to us as, how is this group kind of rigging the system so that we don't look at them and we kind of keep fighting with each other and seeing these two halves to this story. So that was sort of my journey to how I got to digital assets. And then when COVID hit, there was all these dystopian, kind of what you'd call conspiracy theories about where this is headed. And one of those concepts that came up was, well, they're going to have us move to CBDCs, central bank digital currencies. And I was like, what is that? And that sort of led me to uncover a great level of detail about CBDCs. And like the internet, like CBDCs aren't inherently good or bad. Like the internet isn't good or bad, but bad people can use CBDCs as a tool for nefarious purposes, which is kind of where the dystopian concerns come.
Sure. Where do you stand on GESARA and NESARA? Are you aware that there are two players on the field? It's not just Klaus Schwab and George Soros unopposed. The Davos meetings, all these meetings that we keep attending and nobody else is invited to. Only XRP is the only one that's allowed to go. We were the ones that were recently invited to Antarctica. We're the only ones that is scalable to 3.5 trillion transactions per second. We're the only ones that have already moved trillions of dollars and never made a mistake, not even for 1,000th of a penny. All of this is coming. The lawsuit, we proved beyond a shadow of a doubt with Emily from QSI, Quantum Scalar Initiative. She's very big on XLM, so are we. So we realized that there was a lot of synergies, and we sort of merged together in a way where we basically cover the whole kit and caboodle when we talk quantum financial system. GESARA and NESARA, about a couple of years ago, I knew about it when those buildings accidentally had an accident with those airplanes. Okay, but I never really got into understanding the whole thing. But once I got into this thing and I started to understand that the 17th letter in the alphabet, which YouTube thinks they own, and POTUS, and the secret meetings at the White House with Brad Garlinghouse, David Schwartz, who's also AKA Satoshi Nakamoto, and I started to look into the GESARA and NESARA, I quickly came to the realization that, wait a minute, there's two players on the field. Okay. And when you start to really go down these rabbit holes, you start to understand that the other player on the field is winning by a large margin. Okay. A very large margin. It's shameful. The score is like 100,000 to nothing, I always say. And it is, because I have people in my room who have showed dozens of people that have shown receipts. I'm going to sing the song the same way because the song doesn't need to change. This is the song. And when you start to look at these people, college loans forgiven. We got a few people now with mortgages forgiven. We got a guy with $57,000 forgiven. We got a bunch of car loans forgiven. Okay. We have Fox News pieces, Fox and Friends. They're talking about loan forgiveness. They're talking about now this guy that we call Biden, who I believe he's a white hat being controlled by the white hats. Okay. He's the real Biden is no longer here as far as I'm concerned. Okay. And he's being controlled because this guy would never have any interest in giving you, college debt forgiveness across the country. This guy was more interested in putting you in a concentration camp than giving you a loan forgiveness. So someone's controlling somebody. So when you take a look at all the anomalies and you put them side by side, you realize this guy is not the same guy as this guy. GESARA and NESARA is winning. Klaus Schwab is losing. You start to understand that Satoshi Nakamoto is David Schwartz because he worked for DARPA, and you start to connect the dots. You start to understand, hey, we're in the movie. Let's get some more popcorn here, right? So where are you on GESARA and NESARA? Have you dove into it at all? And let us know what you know.
Oh yeah. Okay. Just one thing I might not agree with you with. I actually think Arthur Brito is part of the Satoshi team.
Yes, and so is Jeb McCaleb.
Jed McCaleb, yep. I think there's 4. I mean, the Department of Homeland Security has sort of accidentally slipped that there were 4 people, and that one of their agents met with them in California years ago, and dismissing the idea of it being some foreign actor, probably. I don't know if North Korean hackers would be living in California at the time. But David Schwartz has been flat out asked if he is Satoshi, and I think he'll not answer questions, or he'll skirt the question, but I don't think he lies. So it is likely that he knows who Satoshi is and is very aware of it, but it might be Arthur Brito, who is one of the most mysterious characters in all of this. It's very difficult to find things about him. I'm a pretty diligent researcher. I've been in research for a very long time, and to find details about him is difficult. As Jed McCaleb, there's a couple of articles about Jed McCaleb. He's done some interviews. I think he's very sharp. I think they're both very sharp and skilled in ways that most regular of us can't even sort of imagine in terms of mathematics and blockchain tech. But I think that Satoshi is a group of people.
Yeah, there's no
And whether
question
they
about
worked
that.
for, yeah. Now I found NESARA and GESARA around when COVID started and my sort of went through my red pill experience. And the way I kind of looked at it initially is it really ties back to after the Civil War, the sort of creation of the US corporation versus being a republic, you know, before that. And then sort of a lot of theories around the gold around the globe and whether or not this sort of gold has been recollected and will be redistributed back to US citizens. There's a lot of like hopium, I think, in the NESARA story, which is where I always kind of get worried that we're being played sometimes with some of these concerns or these ideas that are hard to validate. I do think that the US corporation thing is kind of crazy. Like as an American citizen, the idea that my birth certificate is like a receipt of ownership is quite a disturbing idea. And I would love to see all of that play out for the best. And that was one of the things I liked about your interview with Smitty was, you know, this could go a couple of different ways. And one kind of woo-woo concept that I'm not an expert in at all, but is a sort of idea of timelines, which is things could go a bunch of different directions and we don't necessarily know which one. And we as humanity could pick the good one, or we could sit here focusing on the like dystopian worst case scenario and end up kind of making that the reality. So I would love NESARA to be true. I would love for there to be a return to kind of an asset-backed currency system. I would love for the bad guys to no longer control the money supply and have this sort of horrible taxation system that really oppresses people. But I also am a little reluctant to not do anything with this expectation that this sort of savior type is going to come and save us all. That's just where I get nervous about this cartel playing both sides, because there are elements of the Great Reset in NESARA, which is that everyone's going to get the sort of universal basic income. Now in the Great Reset, it's going to be barely enough to survive, but in NESARA, it's going to be abundance. That's kind of a technical detail. So yeah, I love the idea of NESARA. I'm pretty well versed in it. I've spent a couple of years reading about it. I would love for it to be true, but there's always a part of me, a little Jiminy Cricket on my shoulder saying, just watch out. We don't know until it happens.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, the only way universal basic income, GESARA and NESARA do not take place is they have a real arrest of Donald J. Trump with the FBI, which is part of the cabal. Within 24 hours of Trump, the real Trump being in the hands of the cabal, he will be dead. And at that point, we're done. We're finished. That's why it's important for everybody to wake up to what is happening. It's important for everybody to fight for what you want. And if you fight hard enough, what you want, you're going to get what you want. Okay. Let's talk about the universal basic income. You brought out a very important point. Universal basic income under, you know, the cabal, if they win, which is, there's no chance of that unless, like I just said, they arrest the real cabal, arrests Donald Trump, and that's going to happen. That's going to be a disaster. But the UBI that they want you to have is a $600 a month maximum UBI, which is barely enough to maybe buy some chicken maybe once a week and some rice and beans. And the state's going to come to your house and they're going to say, hey, are you receiving your checks? Yeah. I've been receiving them for the last, 4, 5, 6 months. Great. Everything's okay. Yeah, everything's fine. Okay, listen, if you want to continue, you have to roll up your sleeve and get one of those things, okay, so that we can, right? That's would be the worst case scenario. Under NESARA, GESARA, because we found an infinity of gold and there's more to be discovered. And it's not the gold that we came off the gold standard in 71 during Nixon. This is gold that's been stolen for thousands of years during biblical times, okay? And there's enough gold on planet Earth technically to make everybody a billionaire, potentially even a multi-billionaire, and they'll have more left over. But they're not gonna do that. I like to think with my feet on the ground. Okay. Is it going to be much better than the system we have right now? Yes. The taxation is going to go away. You understand that, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So, yes. Your property taxes, income taxes, your capital gains taxes, all of that goes away, and everybody's got to pay the flat tax. This is again more for your audience and mine. What happens in essence at this stage, because you're gonna have anywhere between a 14 to 16, 17% flat tax on things you want that you don't need. Okay. Everybody has to pay. Nobody is exempt from the system. So when you take that into account, there's going to be a lot more money inside that cash register at the end of every quarter than the old system. Okay. And because everybody who's a multi-billionaire, multi-trillionaire hides behind what? A 501c3. Your churches do it. Your big corporations do it. Everybody does it. And nobody pays any taxes except for the middle class and the poor people. And that's why we're poor and they're rich. And they have a collection of yachts. All of this is going to go away. All of it is going to go away. Central bank digital currency. Let's talk about that for a little while, because that's a very interesting subject to me. See, Brad Garlinghouse, basically, I call him a gangster on the inside. Okay. He basically, when they realized that Bitcoin doesn't work and Bitcoin, 2 transactions per minute, moving 1.5 Bitcoins, and it costs, $4,000, $5,000 to move from point A to point B, and you got to wait 5 or 6 hours or sometimes a couple of days to receive your Bitcoin. In a world that we're going into, that's going to be highly demanding, that doesn't work. So they had to go back to the drawing board. So I say David Schwartz is Satoshi Nakamoto, probably along with Arthur Britto and Jeff McCaleb and a few others, but they're all incognito. The government knows who they are, believe me, right? They took 4 brands from Japan, Satoshi, Motorola, Mitsubishi, and they came out with a word salad, and they came out with Satoshi Nakamoto. Okay? Satoshi Nakamoto is supposedly this elusive guy, and I'm starting to believe that a lot of people are starting to believe me that I'm right, that David Schwartz is the only one that could have went back to the drawing board. The good news is that Bitcoin is fixed. It's called XRP. That's what it's called. So the reality is now we're going into the central bank digital currency. See, the banks went away for a little while because they poo-pooed the XRP concept. They said, we don't need that stuff. We don't need, digital assets. We're fine. When they realized that their goose is cooked and they've been had, and that there's something that's going to circumvent the entire system, they went and they tried to create their own Ripple, their own XRP. And they failed miserably because they tried to recruit people that were supposedly competent. The problem is that Ripple has already hired the most talented people in the world. Bet everything you have already worked for Ripple. So when they realized that they could not build their own XRP, their own Ripple, they went back and tried to get into the good graces of who? Brad Garlinghouse. Brad Garlinghouse, hey, don't worry about it. We're gonna make this central bank digital currency for you. The central bank digital currency will not be needed because once this thing blows up and you're making, $8 million a month interest, and you realize that your local bakery, your local pizza shop, your local sushi joint, your local hardware store, your local everything is accepting digital assets as payment, and you could pay them peer to peer. Central bank digital currencies are going to go away. Will some of the banks be able to reinvent themselves and become sort of like PolySign, a custodial type institution? Yes. But most of the banks, bet the shit underneath your shoes, are going to go away. Look at Tim Draper. Tim Draper was on stage with who? Gary Gensler. And you heard that spiel, right? Mm-hmm. I don't profess to be anywhere near as smart as a Tim Draper. Okay? He said the banks are going to go away. Who else said that? McAfee said that. Kiyosaki said that. Many, many smart people are saying the banks are finished. Otherwise, this manipulation of the market would not be necessary. If the bankers can go be worth, 50 million, 100 million, and be worth billions or trillions of dollars, this goose would have been cooked out and would have been out of the oven a long time ago. But because they don't want you to have it, they're manipulating the market with the Wall Street boys and girls, whatever. This is a big shit show. You're in a movie, and it's very hard to connect the dots. I sympathize with XRP Army 1.0, not wanting to come over because they're going to lose, probably 50% of their crowd, or all a bunch of normies that don't understand the 17th letter alphabet. It's all connected. The low-lying satellites, the nodes residing in outer space, the supercomputers, the quantum computers, one in Reno, one in Spain, one in Dubai. It's all connected. There's a lot of dots to connect here. You need a lot of brain power to sort of try and figure out what this all is. I think we got our finger on it. Can you make an argument how CBDCs survive?
So let's talk about banks for a second. So
Sure.
in the United States, we had a series of founding families, you could call them. They kind of function like the mob. You know, they are these sort of rich banking families. They come from Europe, and they created some banks in the US that became very, very large. And a way to protect their monopoly was through a central bank that kind of acts like a gatekeeper. And so the Federal Reserve System is a private corporation in the United States. It is owned by shareholders, which we don't really know, but it's very likely they are those banks. So there's a small group of banks who own them. And what they've done throughout history is they have events that wipe out their competition. The 2009, if you remember the 2009 banking crisis, one of the things that happened after that was all these small regional banks disappeared. They either collapsed or they were absorbed into larger banks. And it basically like was a tidal wave where the big banks were left standing and everybody else sort of washed away. So this is where I try to figure out, well, what if they've been planning this for a while and they're going to use this as a new opportunity to wipe out all of their competition, what's the play? Now, this is the thing, is like the commercial banks like JP Morgan, like they literally own part of the Fed, like they're shareholders in the Fed along with the other families. So they're not in competition with each other. And that's sort of where it gets to be a little confusing, because it looks at first surface level, if we had a central bank digital currency where the central bank was issuing money directly to people, wouldn't that cut the commercial banks out of the system? Like, aren't they going to get fired by that? Well, maybe, but maybe not. Then there's this point that you brought up about sort of computing. And is the issue just that Wall Street traders are just going to become obsolete because of things like BlackRock's Aladdin that are so much smarter at trading that we just don't need people to do it anymore? So they're just getting ahead of the curve. I don't have all of those answers figured out, because it's not just us versus them. There's all these sort of factions within that world that are competing with each other. There's kind of old school Wall Street and new school Wall Street that there's sort of a turf war going on. But now one thing about CBDCs to understand, though, is that there's two kinds. There is the wholesale CBDCs, which is what banks use to send money to each other. So if I have money in New York and I want to send it to somebody in Spain, like they need a way to send that value across borders. And that's what wholesale CBDCs are for. That's really Ripple's wheelhouse. That's what the XRP ledger is. And there's really no dystopian concerns about that. FedNow, which is the US kind of version, or the Federal Reserve has a system of like similar that they're planning. The concern with CBDCs, what you brought up before, are the retail CBDCs, which is when the central bank issues currencies to the people. I think that's sadly going to hit Europe and possibly Australia and some other sort of smaller countries first. The US is going to be very resistant to that because it's just such a much bigger country and we have a lot more resources available here. But in Europe, there's an energy crisis, there's food crisis. People are going to be desperate. And what people will often do in response to a crisis is accept a handout with strings attached. And that's what UBI would be in Europe. Now, whether GESARA hits before that, I don't know. Like the situation in Europe is pretty bad right now in terms of energy and food shortages. Like there's no fertilizer to grow food. The Dutch farmers are being told they can't farm anymore. The Italian farmers are rebelling as well. So if the farming system isn't making food and there isn't energy to heat people's homes in the winter, there's going to be some rough situations in Europe. That would be the perfect way for them to introduce this UBI, central bank digital currency, as the salvation to, or this, the savior to this terrible problem. So it looks like there are plans to implement CBDCs in many, many countries. The US is being slow. And so CBDCs, I would expect, even if GESARA is to happen, it'll probably be after they hit the European markets, which could very likely be in the next.
This is why I say it's not going to happen fast. It's going to happen slow. I don't think this thing is going to happen next week, next month, maybe not even next year. I say there's a very strong possibility because see, your emergency because you want to become rich, Molly, my emergency because I want to become rich tomorrow too, is not their emergency. They're worth hundreds of millions of dollars. We're not. We're trying to get a crumb. Okay. And so the bottom line is a central bank digital currency, allowing them to have that system. Let's say it manifests to their liking. They're going to be able to literally create central bank digital currencies until the cows come home. No limit. We're back to the old Federal Reserve system.
The fiat system, it's probably based on debt. Now, there is all this stuff with these central banks around the world stockpiling gold. And if the BRICS nations like Russia and China create a new basket currency that is backed by gold, the world's wealth is going to want to park their money in there versus the dollar or the euro that are fiat based. So we also have this situation of East versus West kind of creating this rivalry for currencies. Now, the Chinese already have a CBDC. They're already using it to subdue their population. The Chinese have a big problem with fiat spending. Their real estate market's about to collapse from overspending in building real estate. So I don't think they're necessarily a better spot. But if you look at how fiat has just gotten out of hand, it's been accelerating so much, especially in the last 6-8 months. Even in the US, there's like a new spending bill like every other week for some outrageous amount of money on some thing that's never really discussed. It's just approved overnight. It does feel like it's building up to this crescendo of a collapse or something. Like there's a one last money grab before they
right. You're not going to be able to, you're not going to be able to have two winners, and you're not going to be able to have two losers. Someone's got to win, someone's got to lose. Correct?
Correct. Now, do you know who Jim Rickards is? He's an economist who's done a lot of work for the government.
I've been following him for the latter part of 10 years before even cryptocurrencies or digital assets came into being. Yes.
So he thinks that our timeline is short and that after the midterm elections in the US in November, it would be the perfect time before the changing of the guard, have a collapse of some sort in December. Now, it's very difficult to predict things because there's a lot of variables at play and things might be based on events. But I think that some people who think that this is still a really far in the future thing to worry about might find out quickly. Because, with COVID, that happened fast too. I was warned about COVID in January of 2020, and then March, like our life was quite different. And that my business I owned at the time was forced to close and adapt. And we weren't really given much of a runway to prepare. I think we might be in a similar situation with a collapse of the fiat system.
Yeah, I don't know how much you follow the 17th movement, the letter that we're not allowed to mention.
I read them all.
Okay.
Yes, I'm well aware.
When you start to really, I don't know how deep you dive. I know I dive very deep. I know there's a few people. I got 100,000 people, and I got literally hundreds of them every day sending me stuff. It's like trying to drink from like 29 fire hoses. It's ridiculous. There's no way I could get, even if I had, there was like 324 hours in a day, I couldn't get to all the material that's sent to me. And I'm an information junkie. I could tell you that they want two GESARA and NESARAs. They're going to try to paint trying to reinvent them, but they're going to lose. Like I said, someone's going to win, someone's going to lose. Were you aware, Molly, that there was a reevaluation before the one that's getting ready to take place with the ZIMs and the dinars? Were you aware of the fact that Donald J. Trump was in with Laura Ingraham, and at the end they were talking about Iraq and whatever, and Trump turned around and says, well, we own $35 billion worth of their dinar. Were you aware of that fact?
No, is that the gold that I've seen photos of from Iraq war?
No, their actual currency that's getting ready to be reevaluated. Let's go back to the Iraqi war. George Bush Sr. is in charge. Saddam Hussein, who we created, we create the monster. And then when the monster gets too big and the monster wants to tell us what he's going to do, then we take the monster down. That's what we've been doing throughout history. And so he said, hey, I need to go to war with Kuwait, and he justified his case. And he said, yeah, go right ahead. But that's not the part that you hear about in mainstream media. Okay, so when that whole entire thing with Kuwait happened, what happened to the Kuwaiti dinars? They were devalued to 0.0000000 something, and the big boys and girls upstairs that some people like to call the cabal, okay, went there and bought it all up, and you had millionaires and 50 millionaires and 100 millionaires become multi-billionaires many times over. Because what happened when the war was over, the currency revalued, and the people that bought, all of their currency for pennies on the dollar became multi-gazillionaires. It's happening again, except now the cat's out of the bag, and the deplorables know this, and it's about to take place. Listen, if you go to QFS2020.com, we have 3 websites. Our website is QFS1776.com. We have 2 more websites that we link to. One is QSIresources.com, Emily's website, who works directly with Whiplash. I'm sure you know who Whiplash is. Okay. And the other one is called QFS2020.com. That is the Bible of GESARA and NESARA. I read the original document. I never was able to get my hands back on it years ago. That is as close as it gets. It tells you about GESARA and NESARA 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, all the way up until we have technology that's going to be allowing us to live 900 years old and beyond, perfectly healthy lives. We're going to have technology that's going to be able to allow us to fly amongst the stars, which we should have been done we're 1,000 years behind where we should be right now. Okay. All of this is why they don't want Donald Trump to come back. He's going to give you the power back to you, the people, GESARA and NESARA. He's going to give you life extension technology. He's going to give you medicines that work, and they don't want him back. Free energy technology is coming. Tesla technology is coming. The petrodollar is finished. The energy companies of the past are finished.
So I have a couple questions that you maybe can help fill in some gaps for me about
Sure.
NESARA and GESARA. So how does Russia fit into this? Are they sort of playing along and having this war, or are they an adversary in this?
No, they're not an adversary. They are an ally, and so is Xi Jinping. Xi Jinping is tired. Xi Jinping has had it up to here with the CCP. He's trying to get rid of them. The same thing that happened in that country that starts with U, that Russia is fighting with right now. That it's a military action. It's not a war. Is the same thing that's about to take place, and I've known about it for about 6 weeks. Some people came and said, hey, not that I have any resources or kind of like that, somebody's talking to me in my ear. I'm not that important, believe me, but people do come to me and they said, hey, there are ships headed over to Taiwan. And the same thing, see what they did with the little ones underneath the ground, using Bitcoin and Ethereum as their front. Bitcoin and Ethereum will be burnt down to the ground when this is all said and done. And the final straw that's going to break the camel's back will be in Israel. All these guys, the BRIC nations, Pundi, Bolsonaro, Xi Jinping, now you got the Arabic nations and Iran. Everybody's joining forces with the BRIC nations, South Africa. It's happening. I'm glad you said that. What's happening with GESARA and NESARA in Russia? Let me tell you. The ruble is absolutely kicking major butt right now. Why? Because it's backed by what? Gold. There are people in Russia, as a matter of fact, if you are from Russia or you're Russian and you know somebody in Russia that has gotten their mortgages forgiven, from what I understand, there are tons of people having their mortgages forgiven right now in Russia. I want to put you on my show. I want to tell the world that this is happening, and it's not kabuki theater. It's not hokey pokey bullshit. It's real. Okay. So now basically Putin, who is not Putin is also a clone. Okay. There's a story about that I've read a long time ago, and people have brought that to my attention recently. And I know that story to be true because I read it. Where years ago.
Remember the thing about his wife?
Yes, his wife, bingo. His wife said that the military came to pick him up. They dropped him off 2 weeks later. The problem is that the guy they dropped off was not the same guy they picked up. You're in a movie. She slept on the sofa for months and months and months until they got divorced. True story.
And I think they sometimes make the clone act like an idiot to make the people lose respect and favor for that.
Yeah. This is all about waking up the normies. This is all about, getting those boxes of eggs up to $18 a box and getting a gallon of gas up to 12, 14 bucks. And then they're going to say, can you please bring Trump back? And that's when it's going to happen. Is it going to happen in 2024? Or is it going to happen at the end of this year? Nobody knows. Is it going to happen in 2025? Yeah, it could take that long. See, it could take that. That's why we preach, a few really legitimate business opportunities that people are making money with us. Because I say, listen, get yourself in a situation where you're cash flowing. If you're making, $5,000, $10,000 a week, you don't worry about when the RV happens. As a matter of fact, it puts you in a position to buy what? More dinars, more XRP, more XLMs, more XDCs, more casino coin, more V chains. And when it happens, you'll just be richer.
Now, after NESARA comes and you have sort of this abundance everywhere, are we going to still have things like restaurants and whatnot?
Yes.
Because if you don't have to work, would you? That's a good
Well,
question.
I'm glad you went there. That's a very good question, and I'll answer it this way. When, let's say, for a hard argument's sake, Molly, let's say you were able to buy in, like Amber and I were able to buy in 6.5 years ago, very, very cheaply into the XRP asset class, which will undoubtedly, there's no doubt in my mind, every fiber of my being believes that XRP will be worth every bit of 50 to 100,000, not because I want it, because of my own greed, because they need it to be that number, because they got to do commerce in what? The new world. And the new world is going to be very intensive. Okay. So the bottom line, to answer your question, they're going to solve what's called the nostro vostro account, the liquidity. The liquidity word in this whole game is the most important word that everybody needs to understand. The old world, when you take into account government moving money back and forth from government to government, big corporations, small corporations, medium corporations moving money back and forth from corporation to corporations, the diamond, the gold, the silver, the car market, the real estate market, all of the money that moves on earth was 5 quadrillion. That's a conservative number when you take into account the stock markets and the derivatives market and so on. The derivatives market alone is a 1.8 quadrillion per year. So 5 quadrillion is a conservative number. Let's just say we would never graduate the old world, right? We're never going to graduate the old world, and we're only going to move 5 quadrillion. The Treasury, in my opinion, because the Treasury, I don't know if you know, everybody got arrested at the Treasury recently. Did you hear David Straight say that on my show and other shows?
No, I know they were, I believe they were audited quite some time ago.
Bingo.
But I didn't know anyone was arrested. I think all those offices still pretend they're closed for COVID, which is
no, it's all bullshit. It's a bullshit story. Richard, citizen journalist, and I tell the story over and over again. Again, this is more for your audience and mine. My audience knows this verbatim. Richard, citizen journalist, Nancy Drew were down there. They recorded the whole thing, and they have incredible credibility with me and a lot of people. And they almost got arrested. Their phones got confiscated. The videos got deleted. But there were dozens and dozens and dozens of police cars and buses, prison-style buses, hauling people off in cuffs because, like what you just said, the audit was failed. They failed the audit. There was money missing off the top. Tell us something we don't know. They've been skimming off the top for years.
So is the money that went to Ukraine theoretically a week ago, is that just fake? Is that not really happening? Or
nobody knows for sure what everything is. We can speculate until the cows come home, and we could either be right, wrong, or somewhere in the middle. I will tell you that the Treasury and Ripple has merged together. I asked this to David Straight and about other people, and they said not only highly likely, but highly plausible that this has happened. This is why they're not allowed to leave the United States. We already proved, Molly, that the lawsuit was settled October 1st, 2021. We went back in the Wayback Machine with Emily from QSI, and we went back and we proved with documentation, all right, beyond a shadow of a doubt, irrefutable evidence that the lawsuit was settled.
But one possibility is that they thought they had a settlement. They had the press release ready. They're ready to go, and then it failed. they pulled
The
out.
settlement, the actual lawsuit you see right now is the lawsuit for the masses. It's part of the movie. I'm convinced of this. Why a company like Ripple is not allowed to leave the United States? Ask yourself that question. They have offices all over the world.
Brad Garlinghouse was just in Europe not too long ago. Like, who can't leave the United States?
Ripple. If they could have left, they would have left
Like
a long time ago, but they
company?
realized one thing. One, somebody made them an offer they can't refuse. And two, they don't want to leave because they realize at some point XRP is going to become global reserve currency. That's why they merged with the Treasury.
I wouldn't be surprised, honestly, if Ripple became the next central bank. If you understand sort of what the central bank's job is they sort of manage the monetary policy for the country, and they make decisions about, they're sort of in charge of the money, right? I mean, that's what their escrow is sort of the money supply.
Right.
And if that was instead now a sort of tied to the government in some way, that couldn't I mean, this is a plausible theory to me that the sort of gold ends the Fed thing means that the private Western central bank, the current central bank, which is a private corporation, is sort of removed from its responsibility, fired, whatever you want to say. And obviously we would need something probably to manage monetary policy. We're going to still need money. People still have to buy stuff and exchange value. And so if Ripple could be that company.
Oh,
like it's not the government. Like that's
Ripple and the Treasury is going to be the new IMF. They're going to be the lender of last resort. So when you solve, like I was saying earlier, when you solve the liquidity crisis in the new world is going to be probably a factor of 10. That means if you got 5 quadrillion moving in the old world, and we are about to graduate out of the old world into the new world, what's going to happen? We go from 5 quadrillion to 10 quadrillion.
I mean, do we need the IMF? I mean, if we're getting out of this fiat system, which is based on debt, creating all these constant IOUs where people have to pay you interest for this made up IOU you just created. And if the IMF has really been giving money to many unfortunate countries in exchange for things like voting a certain way or whatnot.
But when we go up 10x,
maybe we don't need the IMF anymore.
But when we go, Molly, we're probably not going to. I don't know how the rules are going to be. We can only speculate. We're going to be wrong on a lot of stuff. I'm prepared for that. Okay. It's not that we want to be wrong. We try to come up with the best potential analogy. And if we're wrong, so be it. But at least, if I'm going to be in the movie, I want to have some fun while I'm here. Does that make sense?